Hello everyone and welcome. In today's video, I'm continuing the 1/25th scale RC Widebody C7 Corvette build. In the previous video, I unboxed the model kit, assembled the chassis, did a little body work, and mounted the body to the chassis. In today's video, I'll be doing some final work on the body, finishing the wheels, designing and printing some custom parts, wiring all the electronics, and doing the first test drive. You'll find a link to this project's playlist below in the description if you want to catch up with what's been done so far. This car is already looking awesome and I can't wait to get it up and running, so let's dive back into this project and get this Corvette ready to tear up the track. Here's where the car is at right now as we left it in the last video. It's coming together, but there's still a lot more that needs to be done before it'll be ready for paint. I wanted to start with the wheels and tires. I'll be painting both of them, which were 3D printed in resin. The hard resin tires will allow the car to slide around some, which should make driving more fun. I already sanded these parts previously, so all I needed to do was wash each part, dry them, and apply paint. For the tires, I applied black paint and a thick clear coat that should hold up for a long time. For the wheels, I airbrushed some black paint since I didn't want to cover up some of the small details. However, since any tools used to remove or mount the wheels to the chassis will be rubbing up against the spokes, I decided to apply some clear to protect the paint from getting chipped or rubbed off. Doing this did cover up some of the smallest details, but I think it's worth it to keep the paint protected. Although not the best for showing up on camera, these wheels turned out looking awesome and will look great on the car once it's time to mount them. Back to the body, although I made a lot of progress in the previous video, there is still some more work that needs to be done. More filler was needed in a few spots, and I noticed that this body has 2 fuel filler doors on either side rather than just the one like the street cars have, so I filled the one in on the passenger side. I did some additional sanding in a few spots while waiting for the filler to dry. Eventually I sanded the spots that I applied filler to as well. As I discussed previously, I knew I'd have to remove some material from the front wheel arches so the front wheels would have enough room to steer. The paint on the wheels was drying at this time, so I couldn't mount them to see exactly how much material was going to need to be removed, but I had a pretty good idea of about how much I wanted to take off. Later, once the car is all together, I'll remove a little more so there's enough room. I wanted to get this rear piece to fit in place, which was obviously going to require some modifications. I marked everything about where I wanted to make the cuts and made the necessary modifications on both the rear piece and the chassis. So far so good. I used a little filler in a few spots and finished the piece by applying some primer. While waiting for that to dry, I decided to test fit a bunch of parts such as the headlights, grille, side view mirrors, and spoiler. I'm glad I did as I needed to make a few adjustments here and there, but after a little work I got all the parts to fit well. Even in its unfinished state, it still looks awesome with these parts in place. Can't help but daydream what the car is going to look like once completed. By this time the primer was dry, so I could do a final test fit. There's this lower section here that's normally a part of the chassis that I needed to cut off and then glue to the back. It's a small detail, but I went ahead and sanded these letters on the back flush. Not exactly a factory rear end, but it looks pretty cool. One quick thing that I noticed was the back edge of the chassis was rough, so I worked a little magic with some sanding. Although I'm mostly just using parts that came with the kit for this build, I did want to custom design and print a couple parts, those being some hood vents and tailpipes. I took a few measurements and designed the parts using Autodesk Fusion 360. There wasn't much to the designs, I just made sure that they would fit and be as easy to print as possible. I have gone ahead and posted the files on Patreon in case anyone's interested. I think both turned out looking pretty nice, and helped give the Corvette a little more of a street car look rather than the deep race car hood vent included with the kit and side exhaust. I was satisfied with where the body was at this stage, so I decided to move on to the chassis. Here's a look at the transmitter I'm using. It's a basic 3-channel transmitter and receiver combo that will work well for this car. I've used this same transmitter for some previous builds shown on this channel. I secured the receiver to the chassis with double-sided tape, making sure it wasn't too tall, soldered on the motor plug, and plugged everything into the receiver. With everything plugged in, I connected a battery and powered on the car for the first time. The chassis is functioning perfectly, so I did the best that I could to tidy up the wires and place some Velcro on the chassis to secure the battery. At this point, the paint was dry, so I could add the wheels to the chassis. As I anticipated, I needed to remove a little more material from around the front wheel arches and the back of the headlights to allow just enough room for the wheels to steer. I also added some pieces of styrene between the magnets so the body will sit a little higher. I was now finally ready to test drive the car, and it drives great. It's very smooth and handles well. I started slow just to make sure that nothing was rubbing or to see if there were any issues. I also adjusted the trim as needed. I really like the clear-coated tires. They grip the foam mats well, but it's not hard to break them loose in a tight turn. All around a really fun car to drive. I'll certainly be making more of these tires in the future. I know I've said it before, but I'm loving how this car is turning out. With the bodywork complete and the chassis functioning great, all that's left to do is to paint the car. I'll be covering all of that and more in the final part of this build series, so stay tuned for that video. But that's going to be all for today's video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.